16 Minutes of Care is a podcast based on the CARE principles, a strategic framework that reveals how brands create impact by caring and, as a result, grow their business. In each episode, Isabel welcomes a company executive who explains how care has helped their business grow successfully and sustainably.
Welcome in 16 Minutes of Care, the new podcast by the CARE Principles. Today, my guest is Tamara Eelsing. She is Diversity Manager at STIB MIVB. And MIVB, STIB, is the Brussels company who is running the buses and the trams and the subways. Welcome, Tamara.
I'm glad to be here.
Very happy to have you here.
Yeah.
You are the Diversity Manager. Let me first start by asking you, if you look at the DNA of the company, can we say STIB for the rest of these episodes?
Yes,
because STIB,
please.
MIVB is a lot of words.
Too long.
When you look at the DNA of STIB, would you say your company is rather caring for people or rather caring for the planet?
I think that's a very difficult question because on the one hand, of course, we are a very technical company. So everything turns around technical aspect of the work. How do our buses drive? What is the technology behind it? Digitalization and things like that. So and in that planet part is also like the conversion to a livable city. And so that's a very technical issue if we talk about electric buses or about hydrogen buses. On the other hand, we are the largest employer of Brussels, so we have a lot of people working for us. So people for us is also very important. And I think if you look at our values, then it's more people-oriented than technical-oriented.
More people-oriented than technical. Okay, interesting. We will talk more about both in a while. You almost work as a D&I manager for 4 years now at the company. But before, you also had a role as a diversity manager for a big bank. Yeah. If you look at those both worlds, where are the biggest differences?
Oh my God, the differences are so huge.
Really?
Yes. So with a bank, with a financial institution, you work with a totally different type of people. There's almost no blue-collar workers, and there's a lot of white-collar workers. You work with totally different objectives. In a financial institution, the most important objective is around women and women in the top, so women directors, women in management, while STIB has a very large palette of diversity. And so we're talking about ethnicity, we're talking about language, which wasn't an issue because everybody spoke English in a financial institution. We talk about this gap between the terrain and the head office, or between the friction between sometimes the blue-collar workers and the white-collar workers, because we are really doing such different things. And then at the bank, we did have, for example, age diversity, but I think women was the most important aspect, while at STIB we really have a large palette of diversity that we are, trying to manage.
As I said, you work there now for almost 4 years. You have indeed over 10,000 people working for the company. As you said, the biggest employer in Brussels. When we talk about diversity, like you said, it's different backgrounds, it's gender, it's age, it's social class, it's language. There's so many aspects in diversity. It goes beyond gender, of course. What is your biggest accomplishment so far?
My biggest accomplishment within STIB,
yes.
I think that is a large campaign that we did around sexism in the company for all of our employees last year. Internally. So it's not that STIB is more or less sexist than society around it, surrounding it, but sexism is present in every company. And I'm not talking about sexual harassment. So there's a really big difference between sexism and sexual harassment. And this is really...
Can you just explain the difference?
Well, the difference is sexism is more about how do you treat people in the daily life. So do you assume that because she's a woman, she will be a better manager? or because he's a man that he will not have to pick up his kids, or these assumptions that a lot of people have unconsciously and also act accordingly. So what you see, for example, what might happen is that a man asks for a raise and a woman asks for a raise, and the man is more likely to get the raise because he is the breadwinner in the head of the people. So it's more of an unconscious thing, and sexual harassment really has to do with sex. Mm-hmm. So it's touching people or blocking their way or really making sexual remarks referring to sex. So there's a really big difference. And so sexism is something that is present. It's very present in our society. It's a systemic problem. And we have really tried to take it into the company and trying to educate and sensibilize people around this subject. So I think that is a very big accomplishment because it was a very large campaign that we did. We published videos. We had an e-learning of about 20 minutes around the subject. We had a full intranet page with all the links to the sources that we've used. We had a Z card, like it's a small credit card like fold out with a decision tree of what you can do as a witness or as a victim of sexism. Also instructions for managers. And we really we really thought well about this campaign. What should we do? Because if someone is sexist and you say it to that person, they will probably deny it. So they will not take to heart whatever you have to say. So you have to see, okay, how can I reach this person? And within this campaign, we really decided to treat everybody as a witness, to make sure that the people that are having sexist behaviors are also looking around them. And if they detect sexist behavior, they might also see, maybe I also make sexist remarks. If I think that is sexist, maybe I'm doing it too. And so they might question themselves on their own behavior in looking for this behavior in others and having an open discussion about the subject. Mm-hmm. And of course, as a diversity manager, you are at quite a high level, and you are not always on the work floor. And so I was very afraid that my campaign didn't have the effect that I wanted. And when I was talking to our social consultants, we have a couple of social consultants in the company, about 10, who were daily on the terrain, on the work floor. They told me that effectively people were having conversations about the subject, that there were jokes being made, inappropriate jokes, but this time they said, oh, that's sexist, I'm not supposed to say that when I'm around you. But the fact that they already realized that their comment was inappropriate and that they made a joke about it, for me was an indication that effectively my campaign was impactful. And is it something that you will repeat, or is it an ongoing kind of education of people? Everything. If anybody listening or seeing this vodcast or podcast needs to know about diversity, it's always repetition. It's always repetition. There is a very good article, I think it's by Deloitte, it's called Waiter, Is That Diversity in My Soup? And it's about the sustainability of diversity actions. And you really see that if you have a one-off action, you have an impact, but the impact declines over time. While if you have nudges, regular and consequent nudges that gives the same message, then you will see that the impact on the long term is far higher than if you have one large, for example, some companies have a diversity week, which is very nice. But if the rest of the year you don't talk about diversity, then it doesn't have any real impact. Diversity is about change management. Diversity is about changing the behavior of people. It's a cultural change. You only can reach it if you repeat and are consequent with your messages. So, for example, with this sexism campaign, what we did, there's also a training on psychosocial risks. So we integrated a module in psychosocial risks about harassment. What is a psychosocial risk? So so the psychological risks that people can encounter in their jobs, for example, harassment, people just, being not nice to each other, but also clients not being nice to our people. And so how do you react on that? What does the law say about it? What can you do about it? So they get a training about that. But sexual harassment or sexism was not integrated. So we made sure that one of the subjects that we are talking about in this training now, which is really a training for everybody who is working in the field, that there's a module now on sexism. We have a training on diversity for management, for people managers. There's something in it on sexism and sexual harassment. So we try to let it come back in different trainings. We talk about it on the intranet. We talk about it sometimes in posters or anything else. And I think this also helps because it's a message. People will recognize the message. So they will say they will be in another training that has nothing officially to do with the first campaign. And they will say, hey, I recognize this. And next time they recognize it. And the more they recognize it, the more it will be integrated in their brain.
In their brain and in the system and in the fact that we need to adapt because the world is changing at a fast pace.
Is changing.
So we as people, we also need to adapt.
Definitely.
So a great example of what you achieved already. What are the biggest hurdles ahead of you?
The biggest hurdles ahead of me are everything that has to do with polarization. The biggest hurdle, one of the biggest hurdles is the fact that our company is quite, and this is a new term, I think, biverse instead of diverse.
Okay.
So we have two large groups in our company. So we have people who came into Belgium, with a great wave. And then we have the people whose families have already lived in Belgium for a long time. And these two groups are the dominant groups. So if you look, for example, at the people from Eastern Europe, we don't have so many of those. We do have Italians and Portuguese, but the largest groups are really, if we can say it in the Belgian way, the Belgo-Belge and the Belgo-Moroccans. And these are really two groups that are dominant in our company. And so sometimes this can lead to some clashes or misunderstandings. And one of my hurdles is to attract more people of other ethnicities.
Different
so
ethnicities.
To mix it up, we need to mix it up. Mm-hmm. We need to create more diversity.
Yeah, because you are diverse compared to other Belgian companies. Very diverse, but not diverse enough because again you have dominant groups within the company from certain ethnical backgrounds or from certain cultural backgrounds, I suppose. Okay, interesting.
The second one is, of course, attracting women. So there's a lot of my diversity problems relate back to systemic problems. So there's very little women in technology. Very few girls choose technological studies. And so attracting women to a company like STIB is very difficult. Even though, for example, for a profession like bus driver, tram driver, or metro driver, there's no real hurdle for women. But also, again, there we have a history of being a predominantly male company. So you always see men bus drivers. And that didn't stimulate women to apply for a job in our company. So now we see more women bus drivers. And women say, oh, if she can do it, I can do it.
Exactly.
So
it's a role model.
Exactly, yeah.
So STIB also really has a role model responsibility, I would say, in society.
Definitely. So more people, more women to tag, that would be really beneficial to us. But also...
But that starts with education.
Yeah, that starts with education. That starts very early. Apparently, girls from an age of 6 already think that they're less good in math than the boys in their class. So
yes, it's very systematic.
It's very systematic
issue as well.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about some more systematic issues, I think, in the next episode tomorrow. But it was really, really nice to have you here on the first one. In the next episode, I'll talk more how you can care for your own people, your employees. And of course, we'll talk more about diversity. But for now, thank you very much to watch and to listen, and take care.
Want to create lasting impact with your brand while feeding sustainable growth? Check out 𝗩𝗏𝗏𝗡.com and see how we can help you. 16 Minutes of Care is an independent production from 𝗂𝗛𝗏𝗏𝗡𝗢, brand strategist, founder of the Care Principles, and author of the book, Does Your Brand Care? Help us reach more companies who are looking for caring and sustainable growth by giving this podcast all the stars it deserves and by sharing it in your network. Thank you and take care.